Hey everybody, this is Michael from Systems of Human Performance. Today I'm doing another read-along of a recent article. This one is about systems thinking and how we deal with complexity. It's not just about systems thinking, it's also about other frameworks and methods that have been tried and applied to dealing with problems of complexity. So today we're going to take a look at that and determine whether or not systems thinking is by itself the best way to deal with complexity, or if there are other approaches, or if it's a hybrid of something in between. Thank you for listening in, for watching. If you're watching the video of this, please like and subscribe and share with at least one friend, somebody who might find this interesting. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Is systems thinking our best hope for dealing with complexity? Today, organizations operate in an environment of immense chaos. It is an environment which is radically different from one only a few years ago. It is entirely foreign. It's an entirely foreign world compared to when most firms were founded. Consequently, the management structures and tools of yesteryear, which are plentiful across industries and organizations, are, time and again, found ineffective and wanting. It is not just the modes and norms of doing business that has changed. It is also the existential challenges organizations face. The dominant challenge is no longer efficiency in stable conditions or optimization within predictable boundaries. It is dealing with complexity. Complexity in supply chains that stretch across continents, or in regulatory environments that shift across jurisdictions, or complexity in customer expectations that fragment into even smaller segments. And now complexity is accelerating again, thanks to artificial intelligence. It's reshaping decision cycles, automating cognitive tasks, and introducing new layers of interaction between humans and machines, and within organizations. In this article, we'll look at many different ways organizations have tried to meet the challenges of complexity and determine which of these is best for the environment of today and for the environment of tomorrow. Complexity and AI. Complexity is not simply more information or more moving parts. It is a condition in which cause and effect are no longer closely linked in time or space. A small change in one part of a system can produce large and delayed effects elsewhere. Delays are a very important part of systems thinking and understanding systems, is that cause and effect are oftentimes separated by long and unnatural delays in complex systems. Feedback loops amplify or dampen behavior in ways that are not intuitive. Local optimization creates global dysfunction. That's the theory of constraints coming through there. In such an environment, traditional managerial instincts struggle. Linear planning assumes stable relationships between inputs and outputs. Hierarchical decision-making assumes that knowledge flows cleanly upward and authority flows downward. Both assumptions break down under complex conditions. Artificial intelligence intensifies this challenge even more. On the surface, AI promises clarity through prediction, automation, and analysis, and provides these with near automation and little knowledge required from the users. I'm going to do another post, by the way, just thinking about the way AI has affected not just organizations structurally and through complexity, but also how it affects the personnel. This is a little glimpse into that is, you know what, now we don't have to have so many expert users or highly trained users because AI does a lot of the work. So just kind of a sneak peek of what's going on in my brain. Yet the promise of AI is somewhat compromised. AI increases coupling within systems. Decisions become faster and more interconnected. Algorithms trained on historical data reinforce patterns that may no longer hold. Organizations begin to rely on machine-mediated judgment whose logic is not always transparent. As AI systems interact with other AI systems, and both interact with human decision makers, the organization becomes less like a machine, which can be taken apart, dissected, and analyzed, and more like a rat's nest of wires, leaves, and refuse, and an evolving network of feedback loops. One keen example of this is the well-known problem of AI compression. AI decreases bias in its responses. This is a good thing. But it does so at some cost to originality and the wide variety and variance of ideas. The most extreme ideas are removed entirely from the output, and we don't see them. And meanwhile, the organization relying on this technology for analysis and prediction is totally unaware. So as organizations continue to use more AI, their decision making is actually going to be less varied. And it's not necessarily going to be optimized, it's just going to be more average, more mediocre, as it were. So that's something to look out for, right? As we do rely on AI to automate things, we have to understand that that might mean foregoing some of the higher variance opportunities and decisions that might create higher value for customers and organizations. Systems thinking, feedback loops, and other dynamics. In this environment, systems thinking becomes necessary. Systems thinking begins with a shift in focus from individual events to the structures that produce them. This is just kind of, if you followed along before, we're just talking about what systems thinking is. Instead of search for causal actors and reasons, systems thinking asks how the system is organized such that the behavior was likely to occur. It emphasizes interdependence, feedback delays, and the accumulation of effects over time. It treats organizations as dynamic systems rather than collections of individual parts, and this is a truer orientation of how organizations actually function. Systems thinking, for all of its caveats, certainly seems to be a more realistic picture of what we see in reality, what we see how organizations function. One of the central contributions of systems thinking is the concept of feedback loops. Reinforcing loops describe processes that amplify behavior, such as growth, escalation, or decline. Balancing loops describe processes that seek stability, such as corrective action or resource constraints. Many organizational problems emerge from the interaction between these loops. For example, pressure to increase output may lead to shortcuts in quality, which increases defects, which then increases rework, which reduces output further. Without a systems lens, this can be misinterpreted as poor performance by individuals rather than a structural trap. So we have these kind of interdependent downstream effects from a relatively small decision upstream. Again, the reason we're introducing this is because this is, at least to some reckonings, some of the best ways to deal with complexity within organizations, is we have to understand how our decisions and different functions interact with each other and delay and create effects, whether they're delayed or not, and create kind of these feedback loops. Another key contribution is the idea of delays. Hey, I was just talking about that. In complex systems, the consequences of actions are often not immediate. A policy change may take months to affect outcomes. A hiring decision may reshape performance long after the decision makers have moved on. These delays create space for misrepresentation, misinterpretation. Leaders may reverse decisions prematurely or double down on interventions that have not yet had time to work. I see that happen all the time. Systems thinking makes these delays visible and forces attention to time as a structural variable rather than an afterthought. Systems thinking also challenges the instinct to optimize parts independently. Local optimization often produces global inefficiency. Theory of constraints again. A department that minimizes its own costs may increase costs elsewhere in the organization. We see that all the time. A team that maximizes its own speed may create bottlenecks downstream. Systems thinking reframes performance as a property of the whole system rather than its individual components. This shift is difficult in practice because organizational structures, incentives, and metrics often reinforce local thinking. Okay, so that's the way we kind of like to approach complexity through a systems thinking approach. I'm going to give you a couple other alternatives to how we might approach complexity. This one I'm particularly keen on as well. It's called human-centered design. Despite its strengths, systems thinking is not the only response to complexity. Several alternative approaches have emerged, each addressing different aspects of the problem. One of the most influential is human-centered design, or HCD. HCD focuses on understanding the needs, behaviors, and constraints of people within the system. It emphasizes empathy, observation, and iterative testing. That, to me, is one of the biggest strengths of human-centered design, is this ability to what we would call low-resolution prototype, experiment, determine what we don't know, and then what we empirically find, and then make that part of our decision. Rather than beginning with abstract system structures, like in systems thinking, it begins with lived experience. It asks what people are trying to accomplish, where they struggle, and how solutions can be shaped around real usage rather than theoretical models. So this is not done in a lab. It doesn't rely on the flowcharts of systems thinking or on any other of the other analytical tools we have in our toolbox, but relies much more on empirical methods of going out into reality and seeing how things work. HCD, human-centered design, is particularly strong in dealing with ambiguity at the micro level. It excels when the problem itself is not clearly defined or when existing solutions fail because they do not align with human behavior. The discipline of rapid, low-resolution prototyping inherent in HCD allows organizations to discover insights that may not emerge from abstract modeling alone, nor from component analysis, which we'll see in a moment. In complex systems where formal models can never fully capture reality, this grounded perspective is valuable. I might also here just contrast the value of HCD in this age of AI is super critical because it allows us to approach novel situations that artificial intelligence has not been trained on, that artificial intelligence can only predict on, and with that theory of compression in mind from artificial intelligence, those predictions are going to be compressed, and you're going to get the same predictions that every other person using artificial design is going to get. So if you want to learn quickly, if you want to learn about yourself in a bespoke and personalized way, if you want to learn about your customer and how your customer interacts with you or with the industry, or how it's going to interact with you or the industry in the future, there's a case to be made that human-centered design is actually the preferred way to look forward into the future, to learn quickly, and to learn in a way that is unique and personalized for you and your organization. However, human-centered design alone can struggle with system-level effects. So again, we see its values, but it doesn't have that broad understanding like systems thinking does. It may produce solutions that work well for individuals but do not scale across interconnected processes. It may optimize under user experience while unintentionally increasing systematic load elsewhere. Within a broader system lens, design improvements can remain local improvements rather than structural transformations. So that was the first alternative. The second alternative is what I would just call traditional analysis. And that's kind of what I called a moment ago, component analysis. Another alternative approach, and one that is still used the most, is traditional analytical management. Traditional analytical management relies on decomposition. This method breaks problems into parts, assigns responsibility or causality, and applies targeted interventions. This is essentially root cause analysis. This is fault tree analysis. This is fishbone analysis. This is just about everything in the Lean Six Sigma toolkit. It is used widely in the 20th century. It's used widely in many organizations today. I use it all the time. I'll be the last one to say that it doesn't work. It's just when dealing with complexity, we have different tools for different jobs. If I'm going and hammering two boards together, I'm going to use a nail. If I need to unscrew a screw, I'm going to use a screwdriver. So the tools, we need to be aware of the tools available to us and then choose the right tool for the job as it's appropriate. I would contend that traditional analysis in this regard is not well suited to deal with complexity. It remains widely used because it is compatible with organizational hierarchy and accountability structures. Remember what I said when I started this essay, is that where we find ourselves environmentally as organizations is wildly different than just a few years ago, and that means that these organizations have grown up, have developed organizational hierarchies, have created governance and accountability structures, and have now mapped tools to improve and find out where issues lie based on these organizational structures. But it's not well suited for our current environment. It works well in environments where causality is clear and stable, like in yesteryear. Traditional analysis works and works well for many organizations, and you won't hear me say that it doesn't. However, in complex environments, it tends to oversimplify relationships and underestimate feedback effects. I would say it's just not well suited for complex problems. Alternative number 3, really probably alternative 2A and 2B, is data-boosted analysis. And this has been kind of the promise of what I grew up on in college and in grad school and shortly thereafter. We were in this age of big data, and we were learning algorithms and ways to essentially do conventional analysis. That's my Six Sigma background. It's my machine learning background, but doing it in a way that's kind of computer-aided, computer-boosted. Alternative 3, data-boosted analysis. Here it's important to note that in recent years, we've seen a revolution in traditional analysis. The world used to talk about big data, which looked at the 3 V's of volume, velocity, and variety of data. Combining big data with elegant algorithms and machine learning, which is AI but not the generative type, businesses managed through data like never before. So they were basing their decisions based off data. Probably the best example of this is like your shopping centers that would have everybody scan their cards. They would understand what everyone was buying. They could look at price sensitivity. They could look at you from demographics or psychographics, and then they were making lots of data decisions based on this kind of big data. These approaches are powerful, yet they often inherit the same assumptions and limitations embedded in traditional analysis, historical data, and causal thinking. Consequently, they struggle with novel and complex conditions. So again, all of the caveats we saw with Alternative 2 based on traditional analysis are still present in Alternative 3 with our algorithms and our sophisticated data models. And on top of that as well is we're more reliant on historical data. So we don't have that experimental, that novel, that forward-looking approach like we do with human-centered design. There are, of course, many other approaches to detail with complexity, which I don't have time to write about. Typically, all these approaches fall into either 2 categories: more elegant computation, algorithms and models, or reliance on standards and heuristics. So if you want to talk about lean, or the Toyota production system, they rely oftentimes on lots of business rules, lots of things like Heijunka and Jidoka and Kaizen and A3s, and many of these things fall into the concepts of standards or heuristics. You can get very elegant as well into the world of machine learning, into the world of big data, into the world of Six Sigma, and you're going to be focused mainly on questions of computation and statistics and probability and making guesses based on algorithms and models. Six Sigma blends a little bit of human-centered design when you get into the design for Six Sigma stuff, which I personally like, and that has an experimental focus and even high-powered statistical focus with design for experiments and fractional factorial experiments. Which approach is best? What emerges from the comparison between systems thinking and these other alternatives is not a single superior method, but a set of partial perspectives. Systems thinking provides structure and a way to understand interdependence. Human-centered design provides depth of understanding derived from experimental prototyping. Analytical decomposition provides clarity of responsibility and operational execution. Data-driven methods provide scale and speed. The central issue is how these approaches should be combined in the face of rising complexity, especially as AI continues to reshape organizational life. The strongest response appears to be an integration in which systems thinking provides the backbone and human-centered design provides the connective tissue to an empirically, experimentally lived reality. Systems thinking ensures that interventions are evaluated in terms of the broader effects across feedback loops, delays, and structural relationships. It prevents organizations from being misled by local improvements that create global harm. Human-centered design ensures that those systematic insights are translated into solutions that people actually use, understand, and sustain. And I would also say that that's tested empirically and experimentally. In practice, this means designing interventions that are both structurally aware and behaviorally grounded. A policy is not just evaluated by whether it balances a system model, but by whether it aligns with how people actually make decisions under pressure. A process improvement is not just assessed by throughput changes, but by whether it alerts feedback loops in a stable and desirable direction. This is surely a surprise to many. Isn't AI going to drive the organizations of today and tomorrow? Isn't more data going to dominate all management decisions? Yes, I would say emphatically yes. And that's exactly the point. At one time in our history, gunpowder and muskets were enough to create a decisive edge over any enemy force. Once your opponent acquires gunpowder, you'll need to develop a new way to get an edge. Relying on gunpowder alone will no longer guarantee victory. Well, now everybody has gunpowder in the form of artificial intelligence. While AI is exceptionally powerful, it is also exceptionally available. Surely the models will get more sophisticated and elegant. Surely many companies will pioneer an application of AI which gives them an edge, but only for a very short time. AI is pervasive, which means any company can quickly mimic the pioneer, even with little know-how or expertise. So again, while AI is revolutionizing organizations, it's not really providing a decisive competitive advantage. And if we have this time horizon of 5 or 10 years, we would surely expect everybody to be catching up very, very quickly. It's certainly going to erode any advantage you have based on AI. We're actually already seeing this in the marketplace, where a couple years ago, if you had an AI solution, they would throw money at you. But now it's actually getting much more competitive because everyone can just create that same solution very quickly. So what I would conclude, as we'll get to, is essentially using AI, leveraging AI to inform another form of organizational learning, organizational structure based around experimentation, based on understanding yourself, your own feedback loops, and your relationships to the industry and customer. Conclusion: AI will continue to increase the speed and density of interaction within organizations. We will just call that complexity. As this happens, the risk of unmanaged complexity grows. Organizations that rely solely on intuition or linear thinking or analytical management will increasingly find themselves reacting to or misunderstanding the dynamics they are embedded in, and perhaps the dynamics they're causing themselves. Those that rely solely on algorithmic systems may gain speed, but lose interpretability and control, especially in the face of novelty. The coupling of systems thinking and human-centered design is a promising alternative. Most importantly, it provides a way for organizations to understand themselves and be experts in their business. The focus on experimentation means organizations can develop organizational learning in a bespoke, specialized way that does not suffer from the compression effects of aggregated AI. And because the organization is doing it themselves, they obtain an advantage of knowledge, albeit self-knowledge, that other organizations cannot acquire and mimic. The present and the future will be powered by AI and data, but the firms that can deal with complexity will be the ones that look beyond the algorithm. So that's the end of the article. I produced it free. I'm producing this free, so please share it with at least one person who will find this interesting. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to Systems of Human Performance and share it with somebody. As I've mentioned in the past, I'm very much enjoying these read-alongs. I'm trying to produce as much content for you all so that you will subscribe and share and enjoy this. If you have any questions or comments or disagreements about this article, please let me know. Send me a comment. Send me a message. I'm happy to talk about it and share your perspectives with my followers as well. Thanks a lot.